Welcome to the mysterious Book Emporium. This week we finally finish off with the last 3 short stories of the novel Tevinter Nights. So why don't you take a seat as we end with 8 Little Talons by Courtney Woods, Half Up Front by John Epler, and The Dread Wolf Take You by Patrick Weeks. 8 Little Talons. First Talon, Caterina della Morte. Second Talon, Dante Balazar. Third Talon, Lyra Valisti. Fourth Talon, Emil Cortez. Fifth Talon, Viago de Rivia. Sixth Talon, Bolivar Nero. Seventh Talon, Andaratia Cantori. Eighth Talon, Julie Arenai. Viago de Rivia is awoken by the rocking of his carriage while traveling in Selene. While he hates carriages, he is headed to a meeting with the other 7 Talons of the Antivan Crows. This is an unusual event, but the first Talon, Caterina, demanded it, as these are unusual times. The Kont-arr were attacking Tevinter full force, and it would only be a matter of time till their eyes turned to Antiva, and as the nation had no army of their own, the Crows were their first line of defense. They needed to make a plan. They would meet at Lago de Novo, a picturesque lake in the countryside with an island in the middle that had a villa that belonged to the Antivan crown. Arriving at the dock of the lake, he is met by Andaratea, or Tea. The elven woman is all curves and dark skin, and her biggest weapon was that she knew she was beautiful. The two had taken a few contracts together, and most recently had gathered intel in the now-destroyed city of Ventus. Her luggage is taking up most of the available gondolas to the villa, so they end up taking one together. Tea knows that this villa usually belongs to the lover of the king, and wonders if Viago spent his childhood here, being the bastard of the king of Antiva. The two meet up with Caterina, the first Talon, who tells them to rest before their dinner as they have a long night of discussions ahead. In his room, Viago prepares for the evening. As a master in poisons, he's preparing to bring a wide variety of antidotes and tests to make sure the food was not tainted, something he always does. Some call him paranoid for his behaviors, always testing anything he ingests, always wearing gloves and limiting servants, but it has kept him alive so far. A knock on the door interrupts him, and he finds Tea on the other side, dressed in a scandalous gold dress. She teases him about his collection, and he has trouble tying his cravat in trying not to think about her. She ponders his collection of poisons for a bit, and she asks if he has delirium. He doesn't, as he has no use for it, but asks why. She responds that if he did, he should watch out for Dante, her ex-lover. Before he could question her, the dinner bell rings. 7 of the 8 Talons begin to argue about the Kont-arr's intentions with Antiva before Caterina thumps down her cane and demands that the arguing stop before dinner. Bolivar, an older elven man, complains that there isn't even a dinner yet, as the group has been waiting for Lyra. Soon, a servant comes with a note from Lyra, telling the others that they should begin without her. The Talons are confused, with some upset that she didn't tell them sooner. Dante assures them that she probably has a good reason, and Julie bitterly responds that he should know. It was the first time she had spoken that evening. During the first few courses, Tea notices that Dante's hands are shaking. He's trying to quit lyrium again. Her ex had taken an assassination job in his youth to kill a Templar, and the only way to do so was pretend to be one for some time. While he had completed the job, the addiction had stuck. Julie suddenly gets up from the table, announcing that she will be checking on Lyra, with Dante insisting that he should go instead. Caterina overrules them both, saying that Viago and Tea will go. The two go up to her room and notice that something is amiss right away. Breaking into her room, they find her body pierced with 4 swords, exact copies of those that had killed Queen Madrigal, a famous crow's assassination. The two investigate the body. She had been dead for hours, so the note had not been from her. Viago also notes that there is a bit of lyrium under her nails. However, there was no signs of a struggle. She had known her killer. Viago notes that this isn't a crime of passion. This is a message that even the Talons are not safe. After the news had been brought to the others, the finger-pointing began immediately. After questioning the servants, Caterina believes that this is the work of the Kont-arr, as it's hard to create a united front when there is a dead woman upstairs. The next morning, Tea senses someone in her room and pulls out a dagger before they can come at it closer. Viago teases her, but tells her that more have been killed. Downstairs, they find the servants around the dinner table, face down in their food, poisoned. This is also reminiscent of another famous crow killing, where in the Tower's Age they had killed many high-ranking members of the Temporal Order after a rite of annulment. Tea wonders if it's the same killer, and Viago wagers it is. He then takes her to the second murder of the morning. In front of Giuli's room, he points out the scratches on her lock. Someone had picked their way inside. Inside, Giuli is dead, her neck slashed with a string of pearls around them, this time mimicking the assassination of a famous opera singer, Carlotta. The person who ordered her death had been a rival singer who Carlotta had tried to strangle with a pearl necklace. Dante had been the one to find Giuli, and the most suspicions were on him. Taya, not wanting to imagine her ex to be the culprit, offers that Bolivar's family made their fortune in pearl diving, but that isn't enough evidence. Viago is also under suspicion due to the poisoning of the servants. The two meet back up with Caterina and Bolivar, the latter of whom is drinking wine to calm his nerves. Dante and Emil come up not long after, and Viago notes that Dante is looking better. He must be taking lyrium again. The two men report that they did not find anything of interest other than the gondolas have been smashed. They are stuck for the time being. Bolivar begins to freak out, saying that they should signal the mainland for help and pointing fingers at Caterina for keeping them alone with a killer on the loose. She takes the wine from his hand and throws it out the balcony, saying that they are crows. The killer obviously wants to divide them, and the group is doing a better job at it. She orders the two most suspicious Talons, Dante and Viago, to be locked in their rooms, for now pending further investigation. Taya interjects on Viago's behalf. "I was with Viago when Lyra was killed," Taya interrupted. Caterina's face softened. She used the tone of a mother trying to explain death to a child. "And the servants? Were you with him then?" Taya caught Viago's eye, and through a silent question, he realized she was asking if he wanted her to lie for him. Another whiplash of emotion rolled through him. As an assassin and a king's bastard, Viago has spent his life watching his own back, never expecting help from anyone. What Taya offered now was like walking across a rickety bridge. He wanted the planks to hold, but he couldn't ignore the endless abyss below. He shook his head. Taya goes on to say that Bolivar's family is known for pearls, which also points him as a murderer, which Emil calmly states that he had heard that the elven man had sold the pearl diving business to Dante. A hushed silence falls over the remaining Talons. That business had been his family's reputation. To sell it, it must mean his financial situation was dire. Dante is upset, claiming his innocence, but Caterina holds firm on her decision, and so the two are locked up. Not 30 minutes into his imprisonment, Viago hears the lock on his door being picked open. It's Taya. The two then talk about if Dante really is the killer. Taya is not convinced, as that wasn't the man she knew, but she can't overlook the evidence. Viago has a plan, however. He pulls out a little vial labeled Pelotoc from his case of poisons and shows it to Taya. He explains that it is absorbed through the skin and on contact will make the person believe that they can say or do anything, even more so if given by an old friend. However, it turns green in candlelight so it can be hard to use. With this, they can ask Dante what the truth is. Taya asks if it could be given from a kiss, and Viago reluctantly says it can be, and he also has a vial of oil to keep her safe from the effects. She agrees and sits on Viago's bed. He gently puts on the protective oil on her lips, and then she asks if she's ready for the poison they put on. She is. His hands tremble a bit while trying to put on the serum. It would be so easy to kiss her, but he just couldn't. As if reading his thoughts, she gently places a hand on his hips. The two then gently begin to caress each other, and as Viago is about to wipe off the serum from her lips, they heard the sound of a cane coming down the hallway. Caterina is coming to check on Viago. The two share pleasantries, with Taya being as silent as she can. After they are sure she is gone, Taya slinks off to Dante's room to gather the information they need. Taya doesn't normally have to come down emotionally after a physical encounter, but what had happened between her and Viago still has her flustered. She gently knocks on Dante's door and is rushed inside by her ex-lover. Their relationship had ended poorly. He had tried to come off the lyrium, but became belligerent. He had come at her with a broken bottle, but she was able to defend herself, leaving a cross-shaped scar on his shoulder. Remembering that made her feel not guilty in what she was about to do. He begins to tell her that he didn't do this, but she kisses him on the lips. The effect is immediate, and she guides him to the bed to cuddle. She asks him to tell her about Lyra first.
"It was a good match for both our houses."
Taya perked up.
"Match? You were engaged. In secret."
Dante's head lolled back on the pile of pillows.
"Had to be. Caterina would never approve. United, Lyra and I could overrule her. Neither of us wanted to go to war with the Canary. We hoped to be married before the summit, but certain conditions had to be met."
"Conditions?"
"Lyra and I were partners," Dante explained. "Not in love, but in business. And good business thrives in stability. Scandal would not be tolerated, which meant I had to give up Lyrium, and Lyra had to give up Julie. The scorned lover, of course, Taya thought, remembering Julie's uncharacteristic outbursts at dinner. She then asks how he seems to no longer be in withdrawal. He explains to her that after they found Lyra, there was a box of lyrium in his room. He thought it was from Bolivar, as that is who he's been buying lyrium from all these years, and he took it to make the headache stop, although he must have taken too much, as he blacked out and woke up the next morning covered in vomit. He explains that he went to go talk to Julie to apologize for arguing with her, but he found her dead, with his dagger in her room. He believes he killed her while blacked out, so he took his dagger back to hide the crime. Taya asks if he still had the lyrium kit. He does. So she knocks him out and takes the kit to Viago. Back in Viago's room, she recounts what Dante had told her, but believes the lyrium kit had been poisoned. After a few tests, he determines that it was, and the only reason Dante had survived was that lyrium tends to dilute poisons too much to be usable, which is why he never carried it with him. Taya determines that it must be Bolivar, but Viago isn't convinced. So far, everything used in the killings were very expensive. No way he would have the money to purchase it all, which left Katerina and Emil. Viago suggests that Katerina could have found out about the arrangement between Lyra and Dante, killing them for not wanting to attack the kont-arr. Taya is certain that isn't the case, telling him that he always assumes the worst in people. He fires back that she should too, as she grew up in the dirt. Taya takes offense at that, saying that at least she isn't ashamed of where she came from, leaving Viago alone in his room. Dinner that evening was mostly wine and cold cuts. Outside, a storm brew, which left something thumping on the window nearby. Taya suggests bringing up a plate of food to Dante and Viago, which Katerina agrees and tells Emil to go with her. Bolivar is upset that he's being left alone with Katerina, but when asked if he would rather go with Taya, his nose wrinkles in disgust. "Don't let him bother you," he said when the door shut behind them. "He's only jealous because you're everyone's favorite." "Even yours," Taya teased. "Even mine." Taya took Emil's arm and steered him towards the kitchen. The thumping grew louder. "Do you know how the crows began?" Emil asked. "Before the masks and the tattoos and the houses?" Taya thought back to her lessons as a girl. "They were monks near Treviso? They poisoned a duke who was terrorizing their village." He nodded approvingly. "There were a group of individuals who did what needed to be done to protect the Antivan people. Over the years, we lost sight of that. Now it's all about family, blood. Instead of a claw working as one, we fight over scraps. Eventually, we'll all starve." The thumping sound is getting stronger now, and both crows decide that something is wrong. Outside, they find Dante's body hanging from bed sheets just in time for the sheets to rip, and his body comes crashing down to the ground. In his room, Viago thought about what Taya had said. Like most bastards of the king, he was given a choice, either live in luxury and exile, or join the crows. He was just the only one who chose the crows. He had become more powerful than his father, but became resentful of his half-siblings, the true heirs to the throne. They knew nothing of power like he did. Pangs of embarrassment and lust plague his mind after his interaction with Taya earlier in the afternoon. He decides to change his gloves and clothes, but when reaching into his wardrobe for a new pair of gloves, he isn't quick enough to dodge the snake bite. He slams the door shut and collapses, making his way to the antidote he thankfully carries in his bag. Emil notes that Dante had been killed similar to a lustful prince who had been cheating on his wife. Taya notes that from the marks on his mouth, it looks like he had been suffocated, then hung from a window. Just then, Taya realizes that Viago is in danger. She asks Emil how the other half of the assassination went, and he describes that the prince's mistress had been bitten by a snake. She bolts towards Viago's room. Taya finds Viago half naked, almost unconscious. Going through his bag, she finds one labeled "Up and Adder." She remarks that she should probably let him die for that terrible pun, but quickly gives him the antidote. Viago awakes to Taya holding him gently. He asks how she knew how to find him, and she explains what happened with Dante. Viago suddenly has an idea, telling Taya that he knows who the killer is. Taya helps Viago down to where the other three are relaxing around a fire, which is convenient, Taya thinks. Viago announces to the others that he knows who the killer is, but he will need everyone to take off their gloves first. They are handed to him, and he lays out all 3 pairs of gloves near the fire. He explains to the others what him and Taya were up to, and that the serum that Taya kissed Dante with will turn green in the candlelight, and as the killer had suffocated Dante, it would be on their gloves. Before the serum could turn, though, Emil plods Viago, saying that he should have killed him first.
Before he is able to rush Viago, Teia takes a hot poker from the fire and stabs him through the leg, pinning him in place. However, he is able to slash her with a glancing blow on the ribs before Katarina's cane comes crashing down on his head.
Why? Bolivar asked.
Why would you do this?
Money, Katarina stated plainly. It's always money with Emil. He choked out a pained laugh. It's always money with all of us. That's the problem. In the beginning, we were protectors. We fought for Antiva, for the people. And somewhere along the way, we chose profit over patriotism. So what, you're killing us pro bono? Viago sneered. Not exactly, Emil confessed. The Kent-arr are coming. I was approached and presented a contract, an opportunity, for a peaceful invasion. In exchange for 7 deaths, we could keep our way of life. They wouldn't make us submit to the Qun.
And you believe them, Teia scoffed.
Emil squared his shoulders. The Kent-arr are many things. Brutal, rigid, merciless warriors. But they are also honorable. There was no honor in Ventus, Viago growled.
Together, Teia, Viago, Katarina, and Bolivar take out their daggers and stab Emil together. The next morning, they signal the mainland for a boat. Bolivar leaves immediately, but Teia and Viago stay to discuss a plan for the Kent-arr. After 3 days of talks, they had a plan. Viago and Teia watch as their luggage is being packed into a gondola, with Viago telling the servant to be careful with the snake, as he does bite. Teia notes that it was strange enough to keep the snake, but to name it Emil was a bit much. Viago notes that it should be honored. It is closer to killing him than any man ever has. The 3 Talons then swear to avenge their fallen, and to make sure to not give them a quiet death. Before they leave, Teia asks where Viago is going. He tells her to Antiva City, but is curious as to why she's asking. She replies that she wants to know if he has a place to stay, and he wonders if that's an invitation, and she wonders if he is saying yes. Viago brings her in close to say that it's a definite maybe, and she smiles. Half up front. It was the type of bar you went to be invisible. The place was completely ran by magic, even down to how you ordered the drinks. Located in Minrathous, it had no signs pointing to its location. You either knew of it, or you didn't. Vadis was meeting a potential client there, and already she took a disliking to her. You come highly recommended, Magister Vadis. Your reputation precedes you. I scowled. Former Altus Vadis. I spoke each word slowly, deliberately. Altus, not Magister. I'd never been a Magister. My father filled that seat out for our family, and I'd left the nobility behind, so even Altus was past tense. My one rule is no names. You don't know a damned thing about me. She arched an eyebrow. The disgraced daughter of Magister Moreno Vadis, lover of an elven servant? Former servant, I corrected her, a little more harshly than I intended. It was an important point. My romantic relationship with Arian Cestus had started after she left my family's employ. Would have been weird otherwise, and a little too Tevinter on my part to ignore the class dynamics in play. Vadis works as a thief for hire now, and her mysterious client makes it known that she has vast resources at her disposal. Vadis almost walks away from the deal, not liking the woman's attitude, but the mysterious woman offers to pay her half of her fee just for listening. Vadis needs the money, so she does. The woman takes out a rubbing of runes, describing it to be from Dumat's Folly, a supposed piece of the Black City itself. She goes on to explain that it had been stolen from the Archon's palace, and it needs to be found again. Not only that, but she will pay Vadis triple her normal pay. Vadis remembers the last job she took which sent her to the palace. Her aching knee will forever be a reminder of that. She doesn't want to get involved with chantry business, however, she needs the cash. The woman hands her a rune, telling her that it will be able to detect if she finds the real Dumat's Folly or just a replica. She also hands her a large bag of coin, more than what Vadis was promised. It wouldn't be realistic to ignore this amount of money, so she accepts. Vadis and her lover Arian are training together. Arian is a skilled staff fighter and is training Vadis to use her staff as a weapon when magic isn't an option. Eventually, the two spar off with Vadis losing, which always seems to happen. Because she had lost yet again, Vadis gets the two water after their practice. They had known each other for years, with Arian working as a servant of the Vadis family. When she had developed feelings for the elven woman, she had found her a new job somewhere else in an effort to ease some of the strain that their class differences had on their relationship. Her father had been furious, most likely at losing a skilled servant than at his daughter, and gave her a choice, either stay with her family or leave with Arian. The choice to leave was easy. Vadis relates the job to Irian, who doesn't like the idea. She believed that she's only taking the job out of pride, as she had failed on her last mission to the Archon's palace during the Pavis job. She goes on to say that if it was about the money, she would have stayed an Altist. This was about being the best at something, and she was a terrible Altist. Vadis takes some offense at that, but when Irian tries to apologize, she just kisses her. After all, Irian was right. But the pay was also hard to ignore. With that money, they could vacation in Valrayo or move to a new city. While Irian likes the idea, she knows that Vadis will never move out of Minrathous. She knows it too well and is comfortable here, and Vadis knows she's right. The Archon's palace takes up a large part of the Minrathous skyline. Late at night, Vadis and Irian are able to sneak inside from a skylight and land in the chamber where Dumont's Folly was held. Looking for clues, they find a trail of blood that suddenly ends at a stone on the floor. It seems that the tile was loose as well, which means that this was how the thief got in and out. But something was odd. Dumont's Folly was put into a case that was magically protected. However, something did not trigger the alarm system when it went missing. Vadis investigates and finds that through a very delicate enchantment, the magic had been diverted, allowing someone to take the artifact. However, someone with that advanced magic wouldn't need to use a hole in the floor to get in. It seems that there were 2 robberies, which didn't seem to make sense. Vadis undoes the enchantment, which does make the alarm go off, but she learns something valuable. The magic was weeks old, while the blood was only days, which confirms that 2 people had messed with this case. Hearing guards approaching, Irian and Vadis lift the heavy stone tile and follow the route one of the thieves took. Inside, the 2 land in mud and find 2 different paths, each taking one side. Down her path, Vadis finds a bag containing mining picks and a bloody note in Cunlot. It seems the kent-arr wanted the artifact. She meets back up with Irian. Irian goes on to say that the note is instructions from the Ben-Hassrath, but a lot of it is in code. While she could crack it, it would take time they don't have. Vadis is concerned, as they had largely stayed out of the war between Tevinter and the kent-arr and Tom. What were they doing here? Irian had also found something, and she pulled out a stone that looks like Dumont's Folly. Vadis is surprised and takes out the rune she was given. However, it seems this one was a fake. The 2 can't quite make out the series of events and why a fake Dumont's Folly was down in the muck here. But either way, it was likely the kent-arr had the real thing. Vadis decides to keep the fake, just in case, as maybe if the whole thing fails, she'll be able to fool her client into thinking that this is the real one. But where to next? Vadis suddenly gets an idea and uses the blood on the note to sense where the mysterious thief had gone. Using her magic in her mind, she sees images. A dock, twin lighthouses, the ocean, and a flag she doesn't recognize. She tells Irian what she saw, however, the elf knows where to go, although Vadis isn't going to like it. The 2 had tracked the kent-arr thieves to Ravani town of Kont-arr, which has largely converted to the Qun over time. In disguise, Irian is able to find that the Ben-Hassrath have a ship in a certain part of the dock, but they were currently taking on supplies and were likely going to leave very soon. However, Irian has an idea. Vadis is placed inside a barrel of food and is taken to the hold. Inside her barrel, she hears a male elven voice talking to a female kent-arr. It seems they knew of her and Irian's presence, but they didn't know where. Further, they believe her to be working for him, although who him is, Vadis isn't sure. When things finally go quiet, she climbs out of her barrel. The hold is filled with boxes, and opening one up, she finds a strange magical artifact. In fact, most of the hold is filled with magical artifacts. Vadis tense up when the door opens, but it's just Irian, who was able to sneak aboard easily due to being an elf. They decide to split up to find Dumont's Folly, each taking a side of the hold. With some luck and skill, Vadis is able to find it and uses the rune to make sure that she has the right artifact. It does resonate with Dumont's Folly, but something is wrong. The magic is starting to grow within the artifact. She then hears a voice behind her, and Vadis is paralyzed with magic. She emerged from deeper into the ship, a lone elf, my client. She traded her thick winter clothing for a simple robe embroidered with an unknown symbol, her hair brushed back away from her pointed ears. She strode towards me, calmly, unhurrying. Not that she needed to, I couldn't move a muscle. A paralysis spell, and a pretty strong one at that. She knelt beside me and gave me a look that mixed pity with contempt. She reached down, pried my fingers open. The rune that she'd given me, she held it aloft, examining it critically, muttered a single word over and over again. Felisan, Felisan, Felisan. There was a hum, and the rune began to glow a steady and an unpleasant red. I had been around enough magic to know that was probably not a good thing. Her client explains that she is an agent of fen'harel. What this artifact was actually a bomb that feeds off of magical energy around it. The real Dumat's Folly was what Vadis and Irian had found earlier. Around them, magical artifacts turned to dust, their energy absorbed into the bomb. Suddenly, the agent falls to the ground. It's Irian, who had heard her come in but didn't have enough time to warn Vadis. She complains about the agent and how they all believe blowing up the people would bring back Elvenon, and when Vadis gives her a look, she explains that they had also tried to recruit her. When Vadis tries to question the agent, she chomps down on something and green foam spills from her mouth. She is dead. Irian adds that that's another reason why she didn't want to join them. The two women watch as an artifact continues to build up energy. There's no way to stop it now, as Vadis isn't able to get close to it without turning to dust. But perhaps they could get the artifact away from the city. They are on a ship, after all. On the deck they had looked out. The ship was empty due to a shift change. Together the two prepare the ship to sail, and Vadis uses her magic to blow the ship in the right direction. While guards do come to stop them, they were able to knock them out and place them in a lifeboat behind them. No use getting them killed. They were able to make it a good 4 miles outside of kont-arr before Vadis couldn't hold the wind enchantment any longer. She meets Irian on the deck, and the two hug, not sure what to say to each other in their final moments. But Vadis gets an idea. She hurries Irian over to the last lifeboat and drops them down into the ocean. Using the last of her magic, she uses a force spell to propel the lifeboat at super speed away from the burning K'nari dreadnought. While they do make a crash landing on the shore, they are alive. Suddenly, out in the direction of where they came, is a light as bright as the sun and an explosion that shatters the windows farther into town. But they did it. Kont-arr is safe. The two are kissing when the K'nari guards find them. An elfin man with a K'nari, who calls himself Gat, questions the two. Vadis and Irian are honest about what happened to them, but question what they were doing with Dumat's Folly in the first place. Gat explains that one of their agents suggested that it had been something important to fen'harel, however his agent had killed himself rather than be questioned when suspicions rose. However, they still took the artifact to the ship, the New Darvarad, where they keep magical items in safety. After their last fortress was compromised, they thought a ship would be safer as it would be able to travel around. But there is something that Gat wonders. Why would an agent of fen'harel hire a third party to destroy them? Vadis thinks for a moment, but says that it would be hard for the Ben Hasrath to ignore a Tevinter Altus seemingly bombing a whole K'nari-owned port town. It would drag all the K'nari into the war. It might even bring Ravane against Tevinter. Vadis is suddenly nauseous at what she had almost caused. Gat agrees with her idea and that she's probably right. However, she had gone to great lengths to save the city, and even Gat's men. Vadis explains that she just wants to go home now, but Gat reminds her that she cannot. Not that he's not allowing her, but after thwarting the Dreadwolf's plans, she is likely to be hunted. However, he knows of a place they can go, an ally of his in Kirkwall, a dwarf who will want to know of their experience and would have work for the two women, and a chance for them to strike back. Vadis thinks on never returning to the Emporium again, but she isn't afraid. As long as she has Irian, she had her home. The Dreadwolf take you. The tea house was a meeting place of sorts near the docks of Hunter Fell. Charter is met with the hornless K'nari standing guard in front of the place and lets her inside. She talks to Sage, an older dwarven man who runs the establishment. He directs her to the room upstairs and takes a drink order from her, remembering the details from the last time she was here, which was almost 10 years and several names ago. In the meeting room is 4 other people, a dwarven man from the Carta, a slender Orlesian bard with his face covered by an opal-encrusted dragon mask, a woman from Navarra who represented the mortalitasi, and an executor who was covered in head to toe in dark samite robes, with a thin mesh covering their face. The group argues for a bit, and they begin to ask Charter where the other prominent groups are at the discussion. Despite the Inquisition requesting both Tevinter and K'nari presence at this meeting, both decline to answer their request. Charter goes on to describe that the Inquisition isn't exactly sure what Solus is planning, and the Carta assassin pipes up saying that he is surprised he is the most well-informed one here, and that he knows Solus's current target. The assassin begins by saying that at first the Carta thought red lyrium was just another type of lyrium. When their best smith found out it was blighted lyrium, they quickly shut down all smuggling of the stuff. After all, blight is bad for business. One day, a Dalish elf comes to the Carta asking to see the red lyrium statue that Meredith had become. He explains that he had a dream, plus a legend from his clan that states if he got the idol, he can free his gods. He then pulls out a potion, claiming that when poured over red lyrium, it will soften it and allow them to claim the idol back from Emeritus' body. The Carta tested on some stray red lyrium, and it works. So they send the elf and a party to collect the idol. As they get closer, they begin to hear a song on the wind, but continue on their quest. They pour the potion right over her heart, and sure enough, there's the idol. They place it in a special container, and when sealed, the music stops. They go back to their safe house and are met with some ex-Templars who want the potion. They try to attack them, but the Carta decides to try and strike a deal. The elf is upset, but they rough him up a bit, and he's thrown into a corner of the safe house. They take the idol with them for the time being. Later, a Tevinter man from a house Kintara buys the idol from the Templars. It's late at this point, so some of the Templars and the Carta stay at the safe house. However, the assassin is awake. Suddenly, those who are sleeping start to have seizures, with blood pouring from their ears, even the dwarves, who aren't supposed to be able to dream. Then they are still and dead. That's when the arrows fly into the building. The assassin is able to take cover and crawls to the knocked-out elf who had been killed by a stray arrow. The assassin pretends to be dead when strange elves come into the building. They aren't Dalish, nor are they city elves. An elf with a Ferelden accent knows that the idol is gone and finds the body of the dead Dalish man. Another elf with a strange Dalish-sounding accent leans to the body and says to him that he hopes the Dread Wolf will guide him to peace. The assassin sits back with his cup of coffee, his story completed. Charter notes that he's been drinking a lot of coffee and seems to be avoiding sleep. He is afraid. The executor notes that House Kintara fell with the fall of Ventus. The Qunari might have the idol, but Charter explains that she had people on the lookout. The idol was not in the city at the time. It was sold to House Daenerys. The dwarf scowls, knowing that his information suddenly wasn't as useful as he thought, although the bard notes that they now know that the Dread Wolf has people working for him and he is able to kill people in their sleep. The executor calls out the assassin then, saying that they believe he is lying, which starts an argument between them. Before it can get heated, the bard then gets up between the two, begging them to stop so that they can share information with one another. The mortalitasi speaks up then, saying that she knows what happened to the idol next. She then orders a little stirring spoon in her cup to stop, putting the wisp-possessed object back into a compartment in her staff. The mage begins her tale talking about how the mortalitasi are the true rulers in Navarra. Their true power lies in the ability to bind spirits to the world of the living, which she believes makes them the truest form of mages. It was this type of magic that a mage from Tevinter came and asked for help with performing a ritual. He was from House Daenerys and explained that his master had met some misfortune. The Tevinter mage wanted to perform a ritual to protect the world against the Untom by turning the Fade against them. Every dream, spirit, and demon would urge the Untom back to the north, away from Tevinter. Down in the depths of the Grand Necropolis, a handful of mortalitasi mages, the Tevinter mage, and some of his slaves begin the ritual. He takes out the idol from a chest and they begin. The mage describes that she was so entangled with her own enchantment that she didn't actually notice the Tevinter mage begin to kill the slaves and use their blood for the ritual. She would have stopped them, if she could have, of course, but it would have been dangerous at that point. With all their power combined, the idol suddenly grows a dagger at the end of it. The Tevinter mage slashed his own hand, and suddenly all the mages' minds were brought into the Fade. Before the Tevinter mage could complete his ritual, the Dread Wolf arrived. It was no elf, no mortal mage. It was a beast unlike any I had ever seen. Lupine in appearance, but the size of a high dragon, with shaggy spiked hide and 6 burning eyes like a pride demon. And it came to us on wings of fire that resolved themselves into a horde of lesser demons as the Dread Wolf landed before us.
You meddle past your understanding, foolish mortal mages, and in doing so you threaten all creation.
The words battered us like storm winds, and the Dread Wolf's jaws closed upon the Tevinter mage, snapping him up in an instant as he screamed in terror. The lesser demons rushed down upon us, crackling with fire and lighting, and our ritual collapsed as we all drew upon our own magics to survive.
You used my idol carelessly to vandalize the Sea of Dreams. Now feel the pain of what you have created.
They all awaken then, minus the Tevinter mage, and a rift opens in the room, pouring demons that took the form of spirits of valor and justice to the untrained eye. They attack and kill many of the mages, but a noble son grabs the idol and is able to make it out alive. There were only 2 left, the mage and another. Sadly, the other was killed, but thankfully the bodies of the dead slaves rose to help the mage in her time of need, and she was able to make it out alive. In the aftermath, they tried to find the noble son who had escaped, but were not able to. She warns the others that the Dread Wolf has earned his reputation as a master of the Fade. In her dreams, spirits whisper that she did crimes that she didn't do, and that her life is theirs once her words fail. During the event, she got the sense that they had disrupted his work. He intends to do something with the Fade, and it must be horrible. The group begins to argue over what Solus could be planning, and the assassin calls out the executor for being so quiet this time. But before they can answer, the bard raises his hand, as he believes he knows what happened to the idol next. The bard describes a tale in which he was told to go and find a lost ring that once belonged to Empress Selene. He finds himself at an auction filled with some of the most important people in Thedas. Before the auction begins, the bard finds out that the kont-arr are present, so he sneaks into the lower chambers to find them and Tevinter mages about to fight. Between them is the idol in some sort of ritual chamber, with an alluvium behind it and flanked with the statue of a hala and a dragon. Then the alluvium, the elven mirror on the wall, sprang into life, and as both sides turned, a figure stepped out, an elf in golden armor with a wolf pelt across his shoulder. He looked at them, and his face was empty of all expression. As one, the Sakari and the Ben Hasrath turned to flee, screaming in panic. The elf's eyes blazed once with glowing light, and everyone stopped, petrified by strange and terrible magic. Even the golem was living stone no more, its crystals dead and gray as it froze where it stood. The elf walked unhurriedly to the pedestal. Slowly, he lifted the red lyrium idol from the pillow where it rested. He whispered something as he picked it up, tracing his gloved fingers gently along the crowned figure who comforted the other, but I could not make out the words, for I fear they were elven. Then he turned back to his mirror and stepped through its shimmering border. A moment later, it was dead and dark again. The bard ends his tale, but both the assassin and the mortalitasi don't buy it. The Sakari would never flee like in his story. It's then that all three of their tales begin to unravel as well. The assassins surely killed the elven man. The mortalitasi too knew it was a blood magic ritual and killed her friend to get away. Charter sighs, saying that there are many liars at this table, and that she asks for her life. Both the mortalitasi and the assassin are upset with her for wasting their time, but she tells them that she fears that she has ended their time, and asks again for her life. The assassin, annoyed, tells her that he isn't killing her, but that she must know something of Solus that would be useful. After all, she worked with him in Haven. "I'm not asking you," Charter said. "And if you think I regret not seeing Solus for what he was when he served the Inquisition, you are correct. I was outplayed. I will regret it forever, and I will never make the same mistake again." "How can you be so certain, mademoiselle?" the bard asked. She looked across the table at him, as his face was still hidden under his dragon mask. "By observing several small tells and 3 large ones," she said finally, keeping her voice steady. "First, that few Orlesian bards would learn to speak the kont-arr tongue, but not Elven, and fewer of those who do not speak Elven would know the Elven word alluvian, for the mirrors that let the ancient elves travel from place to place. Second, that the executor has not moved since you touched his hand while he and the assassin argued. And third, that you never drank your tea." The assassin and the mortalitasi turned. "I know you hate the taste of tea," Charter said softly. "It was a joke around Skyhold. Why would you order it? Why would you order it?" "Because it was a joke around Skyhold," said the man in the dragon mask. He sounded tired. "I was uncertain this costume would suffice, so I did everything that the Dread Wolf would not, except, it seems, bring myself to drink the tea." "I asked for my life," Charter said a third time. The assassin and the mortalitasi both sprang, and the eyes behind the dragon mask blazed with a fiery light for a moment. "Arlasa Mala," he said, and his Orlesian accent was gone, replaced by a rolling lit that was almost Dalish, but not quite. "I grant it to you." Now everyone in the room, minus Solus and Charter, are petrified. He removes his mask and wig and walks over to the mortalitasi staff, where he takes out her stirring spoon and frees the wisp inside. Charter compliments him on his magical skill with the executor, as he had managed to petrify the person inside, but not their robes. Solus warns her not to work with the group, but she jokes that they can't be more dangerous than the elf trying to end the world, to which he smiles. Before he leaves, Charter asks why he came personally. He only responds that it was because the Inquisition was involved. He asks why Charter had come as well, and she asks if he really thought that they wouldn't try to stop him after what he told the Inquisitor. Solus explains that it was a moment of weakness, but he wanted the Inquisitor to live a few years of peace before his ritual was complete. He has no choice but to do this, and the elves, like Charter, who remain, might even find the world better. Charter thinks for a moment of a human woman named Tessa and notes that there are those she cares for deeply who would not. Solus smiles sadly at her, saying that he knows the feeling. He tells her that he isn't a god. He's a prideful, hot-headed, foolish man who's doing what he can. Before he leaves, he asks that she tell the Inquisitor that he is sorry. Then he is gone. Alone, Charter begins to shake as she writes down her report. She didn't learn much, but it's more than they knew. Discussion. Before we get into the novel, I am so terribly sorry about the almost 4-month gap between episodes. I had to take time off a little earlier than I would have liked due to some minor health complications for pregnancy, but rest assured, both me and my daughter are fine now. We also have a lot to talk about today, and I'm already shortening things down just a little bit to try to make this not super long, so let's start off with thanking the amazing artists for this week. First, thank you to Dreaming Jin on Twitter for sending this amazing piece. They have more stuff on their Twitter, so please go check them out. Thank you to Maja for this image of Solus in all of his wigged glory talking to the others. You can find more of their amazing art over on their Instagram at majaluingart. And thank you to Viri Vivrari, I'm going to say that's how this is pronounced, for this lovely image of Solus unmasking himself. You can find them on YouTube as Viri Vivrari. Don't just look at the screen and how to spell that because I am definitely pronouncing it wrong. Now, 2 images that I couldn't actually quite fit into the story like I normally do, but I still want to share them come from Angel. The first one is Solus in his wonderful wig, and another as Solus imagined as Freddy Krueger, as he can kill people in their sleep. You can find her over on DeviantArt and Tumblr as Angel the Goblin Queen. So, 8 Little Talons is the longest in the whole novel, so I had to just really whittle it down a lot because I didn't want to be here all day. Sadly, something that got whittled down was a lot of the character interactions, which is like the main part of the story. And in saying that, it seems like a weird thing to cut, but I felt that it would just be easier to sum up those important character interactions here. In order of appearance, the first important relationship is between Katerina and Thea. Thea calls her Nona the entire story, and she reflects on what she loves most about her first Talon, that she had the ability to make grown men feel like children. Now, Viago explains later on that Thea often views the Talons like a family, probably due to her background on the streets and not having one for herself. The second important relationship is between Viago and Thea. While this story is a murder mystery, to me the whole chapter seemed to be more about their relationship, and almost every other page is flirting and sexual tension. So while it sort of seemed out of blue in the summary, in reality, the bits of their relationship is really the whole point. I just didn't include it because it can just best be summed up like this. Viago is an uptight, over-controlled gentleman who denies his desires, and Thea is the woman everyone wants, but she is dead set on breaking through his shell. The relationship is playful, but just right on that cusp where they know they like each other, but can't quite determine what the relationship should be. The third is Bolivar Nero and kind of everyone else. Bolivar is an elf but has no sympathies for Thea. He gets along with almost no one in the current Talon roster, and his fortunes are shoddy at best. He drinks too much, is a bit of a coward, and is overall just sort of there. Actually, I'm kind of surprised he made it out alive. Now, while everyone else also had some interesting interactions, they all died, so I'm just going to assume it won't matter, and I'm just not going to talk about it, and if you're curious, just go read the book. Viago and Thea mentioned that they were at the Fall of Ventus gathering information about the kont-arr. We actually see both of them in the comics Deception, although neither are named at the time, which while reading it I had the thought of we should probably know more about these people because you could just sense that there was something else, and so I guess here that is. Now if you haven't read the comic, they help the heroes run distraction to gather an item that they need, and in the process kill the older brother of Francesca, a daughter of a magister that would become the focus of Blue Wraith. It's a very small part overall, and sort of an odd crossover, if I'm to be honest. Let's also talk about Caterina Della Morte. Her name, or at least her last name, should sound familiar. This is the grandmother that we heard so much about to Lucanus and Ilario from the previous story in this collection, The Wigmaker's Job. Now, Caterina and her grandsons were made for this novel, and I have really no insights to them, but she sounds like she's been the first Talon for a while now. From Joy, Lyra Velisti. Her house has seen frequent Talon turnover in recent history. Claudia was 3rd Talon until 941 Dragon, and has history with Zevran and King Alistair in the comics. Ezio was 3rd Talon around 941 Dragon to 944 Dragon. Nice Assassin's Creed reference during Wicked Eyes, Wicked Hearts. Lyra took the position in 944 Dragon, and then she died. Now, I'll only add that we don't know exactly when Ezio left the role as Talon and when Lyra took it up, or even what year she died. Now, I think when we actually get a date for the game, we might be able to place it a little bit better. But yeah, a quick history on the Velisti house. Thank you. From Yasht, I'm somewhat surprised that an elf made it to the rank of Talon. The way Zevran described them, it didn't really seem to me that they would give out leading positions based on skill alone, but also blood. Maybe it changed when he went on his rampage? Yeah, so let's talk about how the crows are structured, and that everything we know about the crows seems to have been retconned. While I'm sure there's going to be something that tries to bridge the gap between old and new knowledge of their structure, we just don't really have it yet, and maybe they just say, suck it up, I don't know. Now, I don't want to make this whole video about the hierarchy of the crows, but just take it from me that a lot of what described in the short story seems to sort of kind of conflict or just not make quite as much sense with what we knew from the previous series and what Zevran said. And not that we really knew much, however, so it's not like the biggest sin in the world. Now, probably the biggest thread to have been retconned is that House Aranai is back in Talon status after being ruined by Zevran years ago, while before it had been almost completely destroyed. Now, like Yash, I'm also surprised at the amount of elven talents, as in the lineup given at first, although one was killed, but yeah, 3 of the 8 were elves. Now, we don't really know what it takes to be a Talon, but wealth is implied. So other than Bolivar, who was described to have been part of a family of elven pearl divers, which earned them a lot of coin, I have no idea how street urchin Taya and Julie got up to their rank. Which, as a side note, because I know someone's going to be thinking it, it also seems that while some last names in the Crows are a person's real last name, some are also adopted. So Julie Aranai is not a blood relation to Zevran. Or at least she shouldn't be. Maybe they retcon that too, but I'm going to say it's not. And what could be the most anticlimactic reveal in this whole novel is that Queen Madrigaal's death was done by the Crows. At least it is from the context of this book. See, the entire plot of the stories is that the Talons are murdered in ways similar to famous Crow assassinations. Queen Madrigaal's death was still a mystery, and some suspected the executors to have done the deed as a calling card, claiming the death was supposedly from them. However, in this chapter, it is only talked about like the Crows had done it. Now, perhaps this is an editing error, or it might just be common knowledge among higher ranks that the Crows had done it, but not to the outside world. I'm not quite sure, but what was once a mystery is now just not anymore. Perhaps a small plot point to discuss, but when Viago and Dante are locked in the rooms, Taya had to break into Viago's. However, Dante let her into his room later in the same scene. Sort of the same scene. You would think that if Dante is the suspected killer, he wouldn't be able to open his own door. Now, this is extremely nitpicky point, but just something I noticed and kind of thought was odd. Now, while this story is a fun romantic murder mystery, I think the main takeaway from this entire thing is that the Crows are going to be protecting Antiva by jumping into the war between Tevinter and the attacking Kennari. 3 of the 8 houses are aligned in this goal. 1 Talon is a coward who seems to want to have nothing to do with this, and the other 4 Talons are actually up in the air as to what they want to do, and even who they are. Because Katarina is leading this front, we can also assume that her grandsons will also be involved in this, which I'll sort of touch on more later, like very loosely. From Saphir's to the Viper, I'm just forever not going to pronounce this right. I'm not sure if anyone has pointed it out, but it seems that this entire chapter is pretty much a giant Easter egg / tribute to the murder mystery book, And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. The name 8 Little Talons is even a reference to the poem that plays a large role in the book, 10 Little Indians. Now, I had no idea because I'm an uncultured swine and don't really know much about Agatha Christie, but he goes on to give more details about the novel, but I'm going to let you all Google that if you haven't read it. Because I'll give plenty of spoilers for Dragon Age, but I'm not about to give spoilers for something that I haven't read yet. So something you may not have noticed while reading is that the narrator for Half Up Front isn't actually given a first name. She's only called by her family name, Vadis, during the entire chapter, and it was sort of only happens at the beginning and never mentioned again. Other than Holix and most of the cast in Red Wolf Take You, which I would argue is actually appropriate in that case, this is the only narrator in the entire novel without a first name. Now, if it wasn't clear in the summary, the real Dumont's Folly was the rock found in the muddy cavern, and the fake one was a bomb. What the real Dumont's Folly is, or even if it does anything, I can't actually say, as this is the first time we are hearing about it. I'm inclined to believe that it's just a rock with no magical properties, as Vadis didn't mention anything about it, and if it was important, you would have thought that Solus the spy would have taken it. If it ever comes up again, it's either going to be suddenly magic because plot, or its importance be the runes on top of it. Either way, Vadis has it now, and maybe they even brought it to Kirkwall with them. I don't know. We also have a small reference to Neep Gallus from earlier in this novel, and Gat, who you may remember from Iron Bull's personal questline in Dragon Age Inquisition. Vadis mentions running a job for a Pavis. While we should remember that this doesn't automatically mean Dorian hired her, as it could be someone from his family, there is a pretty good chance it's him. What exactly it was and why they wanted her to steal something out of the Archon's palace, I'm not sure. But it is something to note that Dorian, or at least his family, isn't above hiring thieves for their goals. I skimmed through it pretty quickly, but when Vadis and Irian are in the Archon's palace, there is a pretty good description of all the magical security systems in place. Stone pressure plates that trigger magical spider statues, delicate magical lines that act as pressure sensors, and all sorts of stuff. We know that an early version of Dragon Age 4 had to do with heists, and I feel like this chapter is showing off some of the ideas they had in mind. While I don't know if any of this is actually going to make it into the next game, I think this chapter is largely what we could have had in that version of the game. When Gat is giving order to a Qunari, he mentions that he must have sent the intruders, that him has to be Solus, and his attack is expected. Now, here is where I have to remind everyone that the Qunari are currently divided, the Antam going to war with Tevinter, and the Ben Hasrath focusing more on other matters, those matters being Solus. From this chapter, Solus, or at least a group that wants to work with him, get to that in a bit, wants to reunite the Qunari in bombarding Tevinter so that he can work in peace. Speaking of Solus going on the attack, we know that the Ben Hasrath knows that they're being attacked by Solus's group. So how is Irian, a strange elf, able to sneak on board so easily? You would think that the Qunari would be very cautious around elves at the moment, and her blending in so easily seems like a security flaw. Which, having said that, Solus' spy then also exploits the same thing, so I guess it evened out and make more sense, and maybe Gat's just really bad at security. And probably what I find to be the most interesting part of this chapter, which I feel bad about saying, but there is a passcode to the bomb, and that passcode is Felisan, Felisan, Felisan. Now there are two possibilities as what this could be. The first is a reference to the old tale of fen'harel, where a town is being attacked by a monster and asks for his help. He shoots an arrow into the sky and then just leaves. The town is later attacked and many are killed, but before it could kill the children, the arrow finally comes back down and kills the monster. A slow arrow saved the day, but at a great cost. Felisan means slow arrow in Elven. The bomb could be what they believe to be a slow arrow. Somehow, or maybe it's about saving the innocents, but you have to do a great cost. Like, that kind of makes sense. The second is a reference to the character Felisan from Mass Empire. Now, long-story short, spy for Solus, who was tasked to get the key to Illuvium from Briala, but started to actually see her as a person and couldn't betray her, so he refused his mission and was killed by Solus. If this is the case, then it seems that Felisan has become sort of an icon within the Wolfpack ranks, or at the very least, this woman knew him somehow. Now, what he could symbolize, I'm not sure, as the details of his maybe death that was left open-ended, he might come back, we don't really know, are really only known by the audience, Cole, Felisan, and Solus. Also, technically the Inquisitor, as Cole mentions it to them in Trespasser, but I have doubts the Inquisitor remembers or even knew what they were talking about, so whatever. So I want to quickly rant about Solus's agents. Now, we know he has agents from both the Ancient Empire and modern day, which I do find surprising and have talked against in the past, but here I am admitting I was wrong. But something to note is that we don't know how much control Solus has over his people. If we remember Solus and Sarah's conversations in Dragon Age Inquisition, Solus begins to lecture her on how best to run the Red Jennies and seems to know a lot on how to do so. If we take this to mean that his advice is similar to how he ran his own organization, then, like the Jennies, we could have a lot of different pro-Solus cells that might get jobs every once in a while, but don't have a strong connection to the main group, and may even have different goals. The woman from the story might even be from a cell that leans into extremism, and Solus might not have wanted to bomb kont-arr at all. I do know this is making me sound like a Solus apologist at the moment, so I would like to go on the record saying that just because he didn't want them to, doesn't mean he didn't lead their way of thinking that brought them into this being an acceptable idea, so he is still at fault, but he might not have condoned this completely. I don't know, Solus Mancers, eat your heart out. Now later on in Dreadwolf Takes You, Solus tells Charter that modern elves might find his world even better than the current one, which I find curious as he seemed to have a different take with the Inquisitor, who he never offered Llewellyn this option. Either something has changed, either in the writing or his plan, or he just didn't want to tell Llewellyn that, like he almost wanted them to stop him. Also, the Wolfpack using suicide pills instead of being captured is sad, and I'm surprised that he condones it. In Inquisition, Solus was very vocal about not wasting life, even a spirit's life, so this must speak to how much he believes in his goal, or again, just an extremist group that he's just doing strange things with. I don't really know. At the very end of this chapter, Gat mentions that he has a connection with a dwarf in Kirkwall that can get Vadis and Irian a job working against Solus. While this could just be a random dwarf in Kirkwall that has connections to the Ben Hasrath, I think most of us are assuming that this is Varric. Now, if it is, I'm a bit confused on how and why Varric and Gat would be in contact with one another. We know the Ben Hasrath are not working with the Inquisition per Dreadwolf Take You, and that Gat's offer seems to be off the record for just saving the town and his people. So maybe it's less Kent-arr and more Varric just has connections with, like, everyone for some reason, but I think it would cause a bit of a scandal if Varric, the current Viscount of Kirkwall who was destroyed by Kent-arr, has Kent-arr connections. A very small detail, but when Charter asks if her party is there, the reservation is for gouache. Now, my dyslexic ass thought that this was the type of paint, which I'm now just finding out is not pronounced gouache. So yeah, I thought this was a clever twist on Solus being the painter, but no, it's a French word meaning left, as in left-handed or awkward and clumsy. Now, the question I have with this is that the story seems to set this up like Charter was the one to set up the meeting. So then, why didn't she make the reservation? Did Solus just get there first so it was under his fake name? Did he pick the place? I just have so many questions as why it was under gouache. For all we know, the name isn't Solus as the bard, but another one of Charter's identities. Probably one of the most exciting bits of this, maybe even book, that doesn't go anywhere is that we have a real in-the-flesh executor. They are no longer a maybe, here is one in the room that just sort of bitches and then gets frozen. They're covered in head to toe, have a voice that can be either gender and is kind of projected and not spoken. There's something weird going on with the voice, and they smell of the sea. Or really, other than Solus taking their anger very seriously and warning the Inquisition against talking to them, we have no new details on what they are. But it is interesting that someone as powerful as Solus is wary of their power. Also, the Executor just seems to either not know a lot about Solus and magic, or is playing dumb, because Charter plays dumb too, so it's not like out of the realm of possibilities. I can't really tell and can't really put my finger on it, but a lot of the questions they ask just seem to express that they're kind of out of the loop on all of this. A cute little world building thing is that Meredith is now known in Kirkwall as Mary the Mad. That's all I have to say on it. I just thought that was fun. During his turn, the assassin mentions that the best smith in the Carta found out that Red Lyrium is blighted, and he's talking about Bianca here. So let's talk the idol for a moment. The first is that all three narrators who have seen the idol describe it in a different way, but none mention the third figure. As the third figure is in one of the few trailers we have for the new game, I'm going to assume it's still canon, but I found that kind of interesting. Second, the idol has regenerated from the corpse of Meredith, meaning this thing can't be destroyed so easily. Perhaps when we found it, it wasn't a place to house it, but to imprison it. Third, it seems to have some sort of liquid inside, or at least feels like it does per the description of the assassin. Why this is or what this means, I don't know. It was never described this way in Dragon Age 2, so either this is new, or it was empty in Dragon Age 2, and now it's full. Which, kind of concerning. Fourth, when given a blood sacrifice, it turned into a ritual dagger. This thing reacts very strongly to blood, it seems. And finally, despite everything, Solus has it. While we aren't sure how exactly he does, as I doubt the Bard's tale is close to the truth, we know that he has most of what he needs to complete whatever ritual he is doing. Now, a large part of the short story seems to be concurrent with the current comic story going on. However, I am confused about some plot points in the comic and how they're going to tie into this. There's just a lot for me to talk about how I'm not quite sure how this timeline matches up, but I'm going to save this rant for when the next comic comes out, so stay tuned. Something that I thought was funny was that a large part of the short story Murder by Death Mages trying to figure out if the mortalitasi were manipulating the Navaran king. Meanwhile, this mage just go out and says that, yeah, they do. So, in a way, Charter accidentally solved the same problem that Sydney did, with the smaller body count somehow. I really shorten the Bard story, as I'm in the camp that believes that this event never actually happened, and this is more of a metaphor than anything. One bit I mostly left out was that the invading Tevinters brought along a golem that seemed more alive. With this vague description, it seemed to match Shale, so fans were worried that Solus had just killed Shale. However, I tweeted the writer and they said that they wouldn't kill Shale like that, so while the story could have implied that he can kill Shale, she is still alive out there somewhere. But on the Bard story, we need to talk about why Solus would say it in the first place. I think instead of viewing this in-world, the story makes more sense to the audience. When the Bard talks about who he saw in the crowd of the auction, a lot of people match the description of people we know. Xenon from the Book Emporium is hosting the auction. Skywatcher from Dragon Age Inquisition multiplayer, and the main story technically too, Isabella, Sebastian, Talus, the hero of Ferelden, or the Warden Commander from Awakening if you killed your hero Ferelden, and Divine Victoria, who is either Liliana, Cassandra, or Vivian, depending on your world state. All the people we know were too busy with one another to see that Tevinter and K'nari were fighting over something strange and magical, and Solus was able to defeat them both and easily capture it for himself. In the process, the slaves also ran from fighting him, the golems were useless, and the K'nari were afraid of his magic. When you word it like this, it almost seems that this isn't really a story of how he got the idol, but a promise as to what will happen. All the heroes of our time won't notice, and those who do are too busy fighting each other, and he will win. From Joy, what happened to the Bard the Inquisition actually invited to this meeting? Was Gauche their real name? And later on, for the Tevinter, Sakari, and Ben Hasrath, a question. Did they decline to answer, or was the invitation intercepted by Solus's network? Can we call them the Wolf Pack? This would mean Solus prevented 3 factions from attending the meeting, got information from the meeting, eliminated 2 loose ends, and purposely left Charter alive to report back information he wanted dispersed. For the Bard, it's a good question to ask, and I don't know if I have the answer. Now, the Inquisition should be on decent terms with Orlais, unless the Inquisitor has some beef with the Crown over the events of Trespasser, so you would think that they would let Orlais know what happened. On that front, if the events of Half Up Front get relayed to Varric, then the Inquisitor, and then Orlais, I wonder how Briala would react to hearing about the Felisam password. There's really no more line of thinking on that, I just want to know what she would do. Now, it would make a lot of sense that Solus prevented the other 2 factions plus Orlais from the meeting, as together they represent the largest armies in Thedas. But we have no proof for it, and I could also just believe that Tevinter and the Ben Hasrath just give the middle finger to the Inquisition and went along their way. As for the name of Solus's army, I've kind of been calling them fen'harelian in my head, but that's kind of clunky, and I think only the hardcore nerds would even understand that a little bit, because I think the marketing for this game is going to lean into Dread Wolf rather than fen'harel, but I think Wolfpack is so much easier to remember and to type, so I'm going to suggest we take that on as a fandom. Now, similar to how I talked about Horror of Hormak, we both learned a lot and are asking a lot more questions about this chapter. So in a very quick bullet point list, just things that are important to either state or ask questions about, but I don't really have anything to add on this subject, so we're just doing a list. New facts. Even in disguise, Solus was kind and polite to the servant. He has changed his form, so to speak, but not his personality. Solus, or at the very least someone who works for him, can kill you in your sleep, even dwarves who do not dream. As confirmed by Solus, he does have people working for him. He really likes to petrify people. Solus calls the magic used by the mortalitasi, where they bind spirits to bodies and things, unsafe and inappropriate. In the Fade, Solus takes the form of a giant wolf with a spiky hide and 6 burning eyes. He is also described as having fiery wings made of demons and speaks in a booming voice. Now, granted, it should be said that we don't technically know if that was Solus himself or maybe some spirit that is the Dread Wolf. There's a little bit of funkiness here. I'm going to say it is Solus because he is fen'harel, the Dread Wolf. Why would he not take a giant wolf form in the Fade? And that was what it was like at the end of Trespasser Slice, the Romance Levelin. I'm just rambling now. Solus is very much against binding spirits, which suddenly makes Cole's conversation with him make sense during his personal quest. And he also tells the mortalitasi that if they ever bind another spirit, he will kill her. And he does. When Solus' horde of demons come into the real world through a rift, they possess the corpses of the mages or the mortalitasi, but not the murdered slaves. He respected the innocent dead enough to not use them. Solus is doing some ritual, and using the idol in the Fade disrupted it. The ritual will restore the Elven Empire, and he knew right away when something was wrong. The ritual also somehow involves the idol. I'm not quite sure where they got that information in the story, but they said it did, so I'm just going to assume that's what it means. And he might also need lyrium for this ritual. Again, I don't know why, but they just straight out said it, so I'm going to say that's what he means. In the whole story, everyone describes the idol as something different. However, Solus describes it as a crowned figure who is comforting another. While everyone is lying at the table, Solus is so bad at it that they are all able to tell his story is bullshit right away and call him out on it. That, or he wanted everyone to know who he was for fun and so gave a crappy story. Either way, he only breaks out of character when he is called out with no other options of denial, and the only one who caught on was someone who knew him. He, again, says that he's not a god, but is hot-headed, foolish, and prideful. Solus is also sympathetic, and he's also sorry to the Inquisitor, regardless of his relationship to them. New questions. Is it important that Solus chose a dragon mask for his disguise that attempted to be the opposite of what he is? Also keeping in mind that there is a theory that dragons represented the elven gods here. Solus throws out the theory that he is a young mage that stumbled upon old magic. While it is not that now, was this true at one point in his life? The Dalish man both had dreams and had legends in his clan that the idol can bring back his gods. The best we know, Solus doesn't actually want to bring back the elven gods, though. Later in the chapter, the man is warned by the wolf pack, so there are some association, so what's up with this? When the mortalitasi are doing a ritual with Tevinter Mage, it shook a part of the Fade that she described as being usually neutral and devoid of life. Is this where Solus hung out in the Fade all the time, or what? Solus calls the idol his. Did he make it, or is he just claiming it as his? Solus has spirits of valor and justice helping him. Was it just for this one event and they were revenge for the dead slaves, or are the spirits just on his side? And if so, why? The demons entered the world through a rift that opened and then closed. Can Solus just do that now? The mortalitasi bound a spirit and is haunted by dreams of spirit saying that if her wards fail, she is dead. Now, does this mean there are wards that can keep out Solus? Thelasan does mention something similar to Masked Empire, so perhaps it's that, and how do we do these wards, because that seems extremely important. Despite being in costume, Solus takes a turn to dunk on the Grey Wardens again, saying that they had trapped themselves regarding being manipulated by Corypheus. What does he mean by this, and why does he hate the Grey Wardens so much that he just has to break character and just dunk on them all the time? In the Bard's Tale, which is largely made up, I think, Solus pets the central figure and says something softly in Elven. What did he say, why did he say it, and why would he include that in the story? In the Bard's story, he mentions that the room where the idol was held statues of a Hala and a dragon, or symbols of both Ghilannon and Mythal. Why these two gods? Now, as this is sort of a wrap-up of the entire series, but something that I've saved up to the very last episode is this. Are any of these people going to show up in Dragon Age 4? Now, the problem with this question and this video overall compared to others in the series is that Dragon Age 4 just isn't out yet, and it's probably years away at this point. So it's hard to talk about what is and isn't important in this novel. So these end up being a lot longer than the other videos in the series due to me just trying to cover all my bases for the future. In that sense, what I'm about to say is just my opinion, and could be completely wrong here. But I know we're all thinking it, so here we are. First, anyone who Solus knows will not be a companion, as that was the gist of the very last scene in Trespasser. So that makes everyone in Callback and Sydney from Murder by Death Mages not coming back. I would also wager that the writer and Jenna Tividies in the end also stay just as writers and are not going to be companions. Harold from Harold Had the Plan seemed to want to retire, so I doubt he comes back. Hollis from Luck in the Garden also seem to be against joining causes, so I have my doubts about them as well. Now, very quickly, I see these people on the screen perhaps coming back in a very small way, but I don't really see them as companion material, I'm just gonna say. Like, either they didn't really know how to fight very well, or they just maybe, I don't want to say one-hit wonders, but they just weren't compelling to me enough to be a companion. And then I'm going to say that these people on the screen, I could see having a larger part to do their importance in the story and how they seem to have more going on with their character to me and could easily be a companion. So where do these final 3 stories rank up lore-wise? Now, 8 Little Talons depends on how big the crows are in the new game, but even then is probably the best source for how the crows are ran at the moment. So I would place this in between Luck in the Gardens and the Wigmaker job, as we know crows will be involved, and now we just know why they will be involved. Half up front also depends if Vadis and Arian come back, but assuming they won't be a large part, then the story really is about how Solus, or at least his people, are willing to do anything to achieve his goals. Now, this is a pretty important lesson to learn, so I would place it pretty high. However, this is something that you can also assume pretty easily. But throw in the details about the magical security systems, I'm going to place this in between Harold Had the Plan and Callback. Now, Dread Will Take You has to take the top spot in like all of this. While I'm sure a lot of what is in here will be repeated in game, this is probably the only way to have it shown to you and not told. And I kind of feel like this is really the story of how the idol got to point A to point B. So that's probably a good thing to know if you play Dragon Age 2 and we're like, hey, wait, thought that exploded, man. And then you read this and it makes sense for the most part. The novel. Oh boy, let's talk about some cover art. We have seen some great covers in the series, but this is one of probably the most confusing. Now, while Last Flight had an unknown Griffin writer on it, at least it was thematically correct. Well, this is a fun cover, and look, the art is beautiful. I'm just going to say that. Take a look at these people. Think of all the stories we talked about. Literally, none of these people are on the book. The best I can say is that maybe the Elven Woman and the Canary Man are from Threes Trees to Midnight, and even then, I think that's a huge stretch, and that's not who these people are. Honestly, we have no idea who any of these people are until the behind-the-scenes trailer came out and was revealed that Ike Amundi is voicing a Grey Warden named Davrin. Now, assuming that he's voicing a black man, that would make this character likely to be Davrin. And these other characters may be also companions. Maybe one of these is Bellara. I'm thinking maybe the dwarf woman, but I think she's a dwarf. I don't know. I'm just assuming here. But another thing to point out is that none of these characters really fit any of the drawings we saw in the behind the scenes trailer. Maybe the dwarven woman. I don't know. So while it's a nice image, this might be the worst cover because it has nothing to do with anything of the book. We could put my face on this cover and would make just as much sense as this cover right here. Plus, the back cover is just so lame. It's just the image, but bigger and blue. And then plus, who idea was it to have bright yellow on the spine? Like, I'm just gonna be honest here, and yellow is my least favorite color, but it's just so not good. You know, I just really hate it. We also need to take a moment to talk about the map insert that was included with some versions of the novel. Sorry if you don't have one. Now, there isn't too much new on the actual map, but we do have like a little bit more to look at of like places that we haven't seen before, but kind of knew were there. But what I kind of want to talk about are the bits of decoration. And by talk about, I just kind of want to point them out because, again, we don't have answers. I just have questions. So there's a ton of sea monsters. There's strange drawing of the veil. This looks like Morrigan. I don't know why she had to be here. Lots of demons and seekers and Templars. Also, no idea what these two compass things are for, but am interested that this one seems to be an eclipse of sorts because there was that one thing in Dragon Age 2 that mentions Solus and Eclipse, so... Now, the novel was released on March 10th, 2020, which is about 6 years since Dragon Age Inquisition was released. Amazon rates this book as a 4.8 out of 5 stars, making it the highest rated Dragon Age book to date. However, I would like to quickly give that rating some context, because while I did like the book, I think the rating isn't accurate. For those viewing in the future, this was the first real novel in the series released in 6 years. While there has been ongoing comics since then, for 6 years we have been living in a mainline Dragon Age drought. So when this was released, it was a huge deal. The fans are hungry and ravenous, and I think they rated it as such. Most of the reviews I saw praising this book talk about how they liked about half the book a lot, and are speculating for the future game. Dragon Age 4 this, Dragon Age 4 that. I have a feeling this novel will read very differently when Dragon Age 4 is actually released, and the stories of this novel either have followed through or not. So where does this novel rank in my personal list compared to the others? Honestly, it's a bit hard to rank this, as the other novels I have the luxury of context. I know how the other novels, say for Last Fight, fit into the greater scheme of things, and I do think that affects my ranking on this list a bit. If we end up finding out that everything in this book never comes up again, it's going to really sour it for me and probably end a blast. But trying to just rank the novel now, I do really like it. At least I really like some parts of it. Other stories seem to drag a bit, while others I wanted a whole novel out of. If we clump that all into one, it's hard to properly fit into this list. For example, I liked Last Flight more than I liked Retreats to Midnight, but I liked The Dread Wolf Take You more than I did Masked Empire. Trying to even out my own hype for the future, I think I would probably rate this novel under Asunder, making it number 3 on the list. While I do really miss having an entire novel to develop a relationship, if you will, with the characters, some part of the novel do a good job at the small amount of pages they have, while others draw upon characters I already love to just get the action going. However, if I ever read this novel again, there would be parts I would just skip over. My main complaint overall about this book is that some parts were just weirdly edited, or maybe not edited? I don't know. I almost felt like some parts were the first draft, or things just clunked in a way that could have been so easily fixed by a few tweaks and a good pair of eyes. But that didn't ruin my experience overall, and the main reason this is where it is in the list is that I miss having a whole novel rather than a handful of short stories, and while most of the short stories are very good, some of them are just okay. I wouldn't say any of them are bad, they're just okay. And so the whole novel, I think, because of all those things, gets a pretty good on my list. And with that, thank you to everyone who submitted entries. Once again, we find ourselves out of Dragon Age novels to discuss, but like last time, when there is another to hit the shelves, I'll be back to discuss them with you all. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you back here at the Book Emporium. Dirthalen.